The American dream is crumbling. What if I told you the loudest alarm isn't coming from Wall Street analysts in bespoke suits, but from the cavernous, concrete floored aisles of a big box retail store? And what if that single store, once a symbol of prosperity, is now the clearest signal that the entire economic engine is seizing up? We're talking about Home Depot, the $400 billion empire built as a monument to American self reliance. For decades, it has long been more than just a hardware supplier. It was a cultural institution, a tangible representation of the belief that with a hammer, a little paint, and sheer willpower, any American could build a better life for themselves. It was the cathedral of the do it yourself ethos that defined a generation. But that cathedral is developing cracks. In recent months, sales have plummeted, and tens of billions of dollars in stock market value have evaporated, sending a shockwave through the economy. This is not a simple market correction. It is a profound signal of a deeper malaise. The executive leadership at Home Depot, the very individuals with their fingers on the pulse of American household spending, are sounding a desperate distress signal. Home Depot's chief executive officer, Ted Decker, has explicitly warned of an economic free fall. His cautionary statements regarding ongoing pressure on large remodeling projects and uncertain macroeconomic conditions are not the sanitized jargon of a quarterly earnings call. They are a stark admission that the American consumer, the engine of the global economy, is stalling. When the nation's largest home improvement retailer admits its customers are abandoning projects, it signals a tremendous slowdown in the broader economy, a sign that the foundation of the American dream is no longer just cracked, but fundamentally broken. To understand the precipice on which we now stand, we must first look back to the recent past, a period of unprecedented paradox that began in 2020. When the world shut down, a strange and frantic energy was redirected inward. Millions of Americans locked inside their homes began to see not a sanctuary, but a prison of imperfections. The peeling paint, the loose cabinet hinge, the outdated bathroom, these small flaws became magnified, and home renovation transformed into a national obsession, a psychological remedy for a world consumed by uncertainty. This was not a minor uptick in hobbyist activity. It was a full blown economic boom. In a single year, Americans spent over $500 billion on repairs, renovations, and gardening. This tidal wave of spending lifted all boats in the home improvement sector. Home Depot and its primary competitor, Lowe's, saw their revenues surge by an astonishing 20%, a figure that retailers in any other sector could only dream of. The scenes from that time were surreal. Lines of masked customers wrapped around store buildings, and lumber aisles were picked clean as if by locusts. The home, once just a place to live, had become the entire world. But this frantic boom, celebrated at the time as a sign of economic resilience, was a fever dream. And within it, the first cracks of the coming collapse began to appear, small and unnoticed. The very materials of the dream became prohibitively expensive. The global supply chain, choked by lockdowns and demand, sputtered and seized. Lumber prices, the most basic component of American construction, quadrupled. A single sheet of plywood, that cost $15 before the pandemic suddenly commanded a price of $60 or more. Metal, fixtures, and appliances became scarce and costly. How did Americans afford this? They did not pay from their savings. They paid by liquidating the very asset they were trying to improve. The renovation boom was largely financed by a massive expansion of debt. Consumers, flush with temporary stimulus cash and historically low interest rates, were encouraged to take out home equity lines of credit or HELOCs, effectively turning their houses into ATMs. This decision, sensible to millions at the time, was the foundation of the crisis as consumers leveraged their single greatest asset to fund discretionary upgrades. United States household debt surpassed a staggering $17 trillion. A few loan analysts warned that you cannot build a new dream on the foundation of old debt, but in the euphoria of the boom, their voices were drowned out. You see, that pandemic boom was a house of cards built on an unstable foundation. And the perfect storm that would bring it down didn't arrive as a single event, but as a series of compounding, crushing macroeconomic pressures. First came the insidious creep of inflation, which quickly escalated into a full blown price storm. This was not just the general inflation seen at the gas pump or grocery store, it was a targeted assault on the home improvement sector. Compounding the post pandemic supply chain chaos, a series of new tariffs were levied on essential imported construction goods. Suddenly, kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and even upholstered furniture, the very big ticket items that drive retail profit, were slapped with tariffs as high as 25%. This was not a minor increase to be absorbed by the retailer. It was a cost passed directly to the consumer, turning the dream of a new kitchen into a financial impossibility. Second, and far more devastating, was the interest rate trap. In its quest to combat the very inflation it had helped create, the Federal Reserve began aggressively raising interest rates. This act, intended to cool the economy, effectively pulled the rug out from under the American homeowner. The flexible financing that had funded the boom became a trap. Those variable rate HELOCs taken out when rates were near zero suddenly saw their monthly payments skyrocket. Worse, the cost of new debt became catastrophic. Mortgage rates, which had dipped below 3% during the pandemic, soared to hover near 7%, more than doubling the cost of financing a home. The numbers are stark. Consider a modest $400,000 home. At a 3% interest rate, the monthly principal and interest payment would be approximately $1,349. At a 7% rate, that same mortgage payment jumps to $2,128. This is an increase of nearly $800 every single month, or over $9,600 per year. This single change devastated affordability, grinding the housing market to a halt and locking millions of potential buyers out of the market entirely. Third, this macroeconomic storm collided with a consumer who was already drowning. The $17 trillion household debt figure was not an abstract statistic, it was a daily reality. Consumers were and are using credit not to upgrade their lives, but simply to survive. Data from the Federal Reserve paints a chilling portrait of this precarity. 30% of all Americans do not have $400 in savings to cover a simple emergency, like a car repair or a medical bill. They would be forced to borrow, sell something, or simply not pay. Even more troubling, this metric has remained devastatingly flat since 2022, indicating a complete lack of upward financial mobility for the most vulnerable third of the nation. The consumer buffer is gone. This toxic combination of targeted inflation, high interest rates, and record high personal debt created a pincer movement specifically targeting the American middle class. This demographic, the traditional engine of the economy and the core customer base for Home Depot, found itself squeezed from all sides. The psychological shift was as swift as it was brutal. The national mindset pivoted from growth to defense. The desire for a new patio or a finished basement was replaced by the fear of a job loss. As one consumer succinctly put it, I don't buy paint, I buy food. This sentiment captures the new reality. When the middle class stops spending on dreams and starts spending only on survival, brands like Home Depot are the first casualties. As these pressures mounted, a strange and dysfunctional phenomenon emerged in the housing market, one that defied traditional economic logic. Even as demand plummeted and affordability evaporated, home prices did not crash. In fact, in many areas, they remained stubbornly, artificially high. And the reason for this, it's what economists are calling the golden handcuff effect. This term describes the paralyzing lock in experienced by millions of existing homeowners who had refinanced or purchased homes during the pandemic, securing once in a lifetime mortgage rates below 3%, some as low as 2.8%. Fast forward to today, with prevailing rates near 7%, and these homeowners are effectively handcuffed to their properties. The math is simple and brutal. Why would any sane person voluntarily give up a sub 3% mortgage only to buy a new home, even a smaller one, at a rate more than double what they currently pay? This logical decision, made by millions of individuals, has created a vicious cycle that has frozen the entire real estate market. Because these homeowners refuse to sell, the housing supply or inventory remains near historic lows. This severe constraint chokes off the market's natural flow. This scarcity of available homes, in turn, keeps prices artificially high even as the pool of qualified buyers shrinks to almost nothing. The market is caught in a state of suspended animation, a dysfunctional equilibrium where nothing moves. The ripple effects of this paralysis are enormous and impact every corner of the economy. First, first time home buyers, the traditional lifeblood of the market, are completely priced out. They face the impossible trifecta of high prices, low inventory, and crushing interest rates. Second, the entire concept of labor mobility, a cornerstone of American economic dynamism, suffers. When people cannot afford to move, they cannot relocate for better job opportunities. A software engineer in Ohio cannot take a better paying job in Texas. A growing family cannot move to a better school district. The entire economy becomes less efficient as human capital is trapped in place by mortgage rates. And perhaps most relevant to Home Depot's crisis, even those handcuffed homeowners are not renovating. One might assume that a family trapped in their current home would be more likely to invest in upgrades, but they are subject to the same pressures as everyone else. They too are facing the high material costs we just discussed. They too are worried about job security and the uncertain macroeconomic conditions mentioned by Ted Decker. They are hoarding cash, paying down variable rate debt, and shifting, like the rest of the nation, into a defensive posture. They are not upgrading, they are just making it last. And this crisis at Home Depot, it's not an isolated incident. It is the epicenter of a contagion that is spreading across the entire housing and construction sector. And the data provides undeniable proof of the free fall. The empty store effect is no longer an anecdote, it is a statistical reality. The slide began quietly in 2022. Home Depot's astronomical sales growth, once over 20%, slowed to a mere 2% and then flatlined. More telling than sales was the collapse of intent. Google Trends data showed that public searches for terms like home renovation and kitchen remodel fell by over 40% in a single year. The enthusiasm had evaporated. By 2024, the slide had become a fall. In store transactions dropped by 15% year over year. The company's stock shed over $30 billion in market capitalization. This is the reality of the consumer chill store aisles are increasingly empty, populated by more employees than customers. These are the dead aisles of a retail apocalypse, lit by cold fluorescent lights and reflecting a deep seated consumer retreat. This collapse is not limited to Home Depot. The stock market freefall is sector wide, wiping out investor wealth and confirming a systemic breakdown. The 1 year performance data reads like a casualty list. Home Depot HD is down 21.4%. Lennar Corporation, LAR, one of the nation's largest home builders, is down a catastrophic 35.13%. DR Horton, DHI, is down 22.51%. Pulte Group, PHM, is down 23.3%. Toll Brothers, Toll, a builder of luxury homes, is down 26.66%. Even Home Depot's rival Lowe's, Low, while faring better, is still down 2.91%. These are not small fluctuations. This is a sector wide collapse. This systemic risk has fundamentally altered the investment landscape. For the fix and flip investor, a staple of reality television, the business model is simply broken. The return on investment, ROI, for renovations has diminished to the vanishing point. With high material and labor costs, remodeling data shows that many major projects, like a kitchen upgrade, now return less than 70 cents on the dollar in home value. The risk of buying a property, investing in its renovation, and failing to sell it in a frozen market is now too great to bear. For long term buy and hold investors or landlords, the situation is more complex. While the affordability crisis may increase demand for rental properties, these investors face new dangers. They must stress test their portfolios against the very real possibility of rising vacancies or tenants who can no longer afford to pay rent. For the average homeowner, the calculus is simplest of all. The priority has definitively shifted from discretionary upgrades to essential maintenance. The new kitchen must wait. Fixing the leaky roof before it causes structural damage is the new anxious priority. And we have to be clear, this slowdown isn't just contained within the four walls of a Home Depot, it's a powerful domino effect that is toppling an entire ecosystem piece by painful piece. For every empty dead aisle in a Home Depot, there's a small independent lumber mill in Oregon that just lost its biggest contract. There's a family owned flooring installer in Georgia whose phone has abruptly stopped ringing. There's a local paint manufacturer, a kitchen cabinet workshop, a trucking company, all of whom built their business models on the assumption of perpetual growth, and all of whom are now facing a catastrophic drop in demand. This is the intricate, invisible supply chain of the American dream, and it was running red hot on the fuel of cheap debt. Now, that fuel is gone, and the entire engine is seizing up. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of subcontractors, independent painters, plumbers, and electricians who built their entire livelihoods around the home renovation boom. They are now reporting that customers aren't just postponing projects by a few months, they are canceling binding contracts en masse. This isn't just a corporate correction we're seeing on a stock ticker. This is a Main Street small business crisis, and it's happening right now. This, of course, leads to the next inevitable and most devastating consequence, the human cost. When a company like Home Depot, an employer of nearly 500,000 people, reports a 15% drop in transactions, that isn't an abstract number for an annual report. It is a direct precursor to sharply reduced hours, to system wide hiring freezes, and ultimately to mass layoffs. Those employees, the very people in the orange aprons who once represented helpful, can do expertise, are now the first ones to feel the squeeze. And this is where the crisis becomes a terrifying feedback loop. An employee who is worried about their job or who has just seen their hours cut in half is certainly not going to be taking out a home equity loan to remodel their bathroom. That employee is now going to be hoarding every dollar they have. They are cutting subscriptions, canceling gym memberships, and, as one commenter wrote online, driving the oldest car I've ever owned and just praying it holds on. The consumer crisis and the labor crisis are not two separate issues. They are the same story, a snake eating its own tail. But perhaps even more profound than the financial or labor impact is the collapse of the brand's core promise. For decades, Home Depot's slogan was, "You can do it, we can help." It was a brilliant, concise message of empowerment. It sold the belief that you, the average person, could build your own equity, your own beautiful space. But that promise was always contingent on an economy that worked, on the availability of credit, and on the idea that the home was a one way investment. Now, that entire promise feels like a cruel joke. "You can do it" has been replaced with the stark reality of "you can't possibly afford it." "We can help" has been replaced with the cynical offer of a new high interest store credit card. This isn't just a sales slump, it's a fundamental crisis of faith. Customers are no longer walking into that store with enthusiasm and a vision. They are walking in with frustration, with anxiety, and with a deep seated sense of betrayal. They feel that the very system they were told to believe in, invest in your home and it will pay you back, has failed them completely. The house, the supposed cornerstone of American wealth, is no longer a safe haven. It's a money pit. It's a trap. It's a burden. This collective psychological disillusionment is the tinder that ignites the cultural firestorm to come. What's happening here is that this economic unraveling is forcing something deeper than just a recession. It's triggering what many are calling a great consumer reset, a profound cultural shift in the American psyche. This is not just a passive response to hardship, it is an active rebellion against the very system that created the crisis. Americans are beginning to vote with their wallets. The widespread slowdown in spending, seen not just at Home Depot, but in the disappointing sales figures from Amazon Prime Day and the contraction of credit card debt, is not just a sign of weakness. It is a powerful message, a consumer led reset. By consciously choosing essentials over non essentials, the public is sending a clear signal to the economy: we will not participate in this high price, high debt system. We demand lower prices, and until we get them, we will not buy. This economic vote is accompanied by what can only be described as a great consumer detox. The decline is a spiritual retreat from the hollow promises of decades of consumerism. Americans burdened by debt and anxiety are no longer looking for happiness in a new coat of paint or a granite countertop. They are fixing themselves, not their homes. The old mantra of make it better has been replaced by the new sober reality of make it last. This is a retreat from the endless cycle of upgrading and a return to the values of durability and preservation. In the place of consumerism, a new ethos of self sufficiency and simple living is rising. This is the quiet revival of skills our grandparents knew well. Small gardens are reappearing in suburban backyards. People are baking their own bread, mending old clothes, and learning to repair broken appliances. The do it yourself spirit, once co opted by retail giants as a pathway to consumption, is reverting to its original meaning: genuine self reliance, and, most importantly, freedom from the debt fueled marketplace. This is a lifestyle defined as less but more meaningful. It is a conscious questioning of the consumer hamster wheel, asking, how much do I really need to live well? So, in the end, the fall of Home Depot isn't just a business story. It's not just about tariffs or interest rates. It is the story of a collapse of trust. The core of the crisis is a complete breakdown of confidence: confidence in the financial future, confidence in the stability of the economy, and confidence in the American dream itself. The home, for decades, the ultimate symbol of security and wealth creation, has inverted. For millions, it is no longer a source of pride, but a source of profound anxiety, a financial trap that suffocates them with debt and worry. In the ashes of this old dream, a new one is being written. The American dream is being redefined, not by marketers or politicians, but by the quiet actions of millions of households. Success is no longer being measured by the size of one's house or the number of cars in the garage. The new American dream is being measured by peace of mind. It is defined by the ability to live without the crushing weight of debt. It is the dream of resilience, of community, and of owning one's time and one's skills rather than just one's things. The collapse of the consumer economy, symbolized by the empty aisles of Home Depot, is not just an end, it is the painful, necessary beginning of a more sober, more sustainable, and more authentic America.